Welcome back, America. I'm Betsy McCoy, filling in for Steve Malzberg today. And joining us once again is former New York Congressman Vito Fossella, who's considering another run for Congress in the coming weeks because the current member of Congress from the Staten Island, Brooklyn area, Michael Grimm, is about to resign. So welcome back, Vito. We are so eager to hear your insights on some of the things that are going to be happening in this 114th Congress. And let's start with the budget.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the American people spoke pretty convincingly in November, basically saying that the government spending needs to be reined in and taken under control, and that this feckless, reckless approach to spending everything and everybody's tax dollars has got to, sort of come to an end. So I think the Republicans, I hope if they get their act together, I believe they will, to coordinate between the Senate and the House and establish some fundamental sound fiscal policy that basically tells the American taxpayer that Washington and Congress and the administration is going to take spending seriously and not overspend on unnecessary items and wasteful spending, and let the American people decide how to best keep their money, but more importantly, put it back into the nation, its infrastructure, and invest in them.
Okay, but wait a second, Congressman.
Yep.
You say they got the message, but right after the election, even though the Republicans won the biggest majority in at least 60 years in the House of Representatives, John Boehner allowed the lame duck Congress, the Democrats, the spendaholics who had just been voted out of office, he allowed them to write the budget for the next year through next September 15th. Does that make sense to you? To me, that was kind of like letting your ex-spouse continue to use your checkbook.
Yeah, well, I think what I said was that the American people spoke in November, and what I hope is that the Republicans, going forward, coordinate in the House and the Senate to carry out that message. That was a little surprised that they did that in the lame duck. I was surprised, frankly, they did it. I'd never, in all my years, had too many people come to me on the street of Staten Island and Brooklyn and say, you know what, you're not spending enough of my money.
Right.
And I just never really would buy into the argument that Congress and Washington has all the answers. Mm-hmm. I've always taken the approach, and I say this humbly, I never lost an election by saying the American people know more what to do with their money than me and the entire Washington bureaucracy and Congress. So,
amen. I so agree with you. So let me ask you, will you and the other members of Congress, assuming you win your seat, will you be able to claw back some of that budget that was allocated through next September? In other words, reduce spending for the fiscal year 2015? Can you undo some of the damage that the lame duck Congress did?
Well, two things. One is I have not announced that I'm running, but secondly, the more important question, I guess, is can you rein in spending and roll it back? In theory, you could. In practice, it won't happen, in part because ultimately you need the president on board. And I think any efforts by any to rein in or curtail that spending will be vetoed by the president, and there wouldn't be enough to override that veto. So practically speaking, no.
Okay. Now, but the House really does have the power of the purse under our constitutional system. The president's not supposed to be able to get any money unless the House approves it.
Yeah, and you could defund, and then I'm sure there will be efforts throughout the year, especially by the conservative members, and I give them credit for doing that, where possible to defund programs or implementation of certain programs, and that may happen. But I just think that practically speaking, it really won't, because ultimately the president has to sign on to any of that. And he's indicated by his actions and, frankly, his words that he believes that we need to spend more money, so I don't see that happening. I think what you ultimately will do is set the stage for 2016 to have a House and a Senate and hopefully a White House where people truly believe in fiscal responsibility. And that, to me, is what the next 2 years should really be all about.
Well, speaking of 2016, there's a very broad Republican bench, a lot of candidates or prospective candidates talking about running for president. Do you have a favorite yet?
I don't. I think it's great to see so many quality conservatives step up into the arena and really articulating a variety of views. So I don't. Obviously, a guy like a respect, and this is not to say that he is the favorite, but I look at a guy like Jeb Bush, a governor of a great state of Florida, and what he did down there during his service. I mean, he's got to be in the top 3 or 4. You have a lot of good voices who represent the interests and the principles of many, but I think it's too early. And what I've also come to discover is it's not just the individual and the voice and what that person stands for. You need an operation. You need a campaign. You need
Right. Well, it's certainly a little early for that. One more important question, important for our viewers, and that is Obamacare. It may be damaged beyond any repair by the Supreme Court this June. And in anticipation of that, if you get elected to Congress, are you going to take a leading role in writing a repeal bill?
Well, if that were to happen, I would say the answer would be yes. Again, a couple of hypotheticals in there, but the answer is yes. And that was the other message that clearly was sent in November, that the Obamacare Act was just what many thought it was before it was passed. Hurt so many who and you know, the old let's just not resurrect.
Thank you so much, Vito, for your thoughts, your remarks, your insights. We will be back with the Malzberg panel after the break. This is Betsy McCoy standing in for Steve Malzberg.
On September 15th, 1950, General of the Army and Commander-in-Chief of the United Nations Forces, Douglas MacArthur, launched a surprise amphibious attack against the Communist North Korean Army at the Bay of Incheon in South Korea. Approximately 3 months earlier, the North invaded South Korea and soon captured its capital, Seoul. MacArthur, against the advice of his military advisors, chose Incheon for his counterattack. The move was risky. Incheon was heavily fortified, and American soldiers would face towering cliffs on its beaches. His maneuver caught the enemy completely by surprise. MacArthur quickly cut the North Korean army in half as their beleaguered army hastily beat a retreat north. For the moment, the government of South Korea had been saved. In an address to a joint session of Congress, General Douglas MacArthur uttered those famous words, "Old soldiers never die, they just fade away," and then added,
"I now close my military career and just fade away."
You're watching An American Moment on Newsmax TV.